going on, guys and gals? Thanks for joining me for another episode of DIY Amateur Hour. In this video series, in this playlist, we're going to be covering vehicle routine maintenance. Everything from brake pads and rotors to oil changes, and fuel filter changes, and O2 sensors. If it can go wrong on a vehicle, or if it's considered routine maintenance, we're going to cover it. So this playlist will be dedicated to general vehicle maintenance, not anything vehicle specific. We'll be trying to do all sorts of different vehicles. Pretty much if it can go wrong on a car, we're going to be covering it just as part of the DIY attitude and motto. So here goes. The first couple videos in this playlist, we're going to be changing out the O2 sensor from the exhaust, the fuel filter, and we're just going to be doing your run-of-the-mill oil change. This car does have 125,000 miles on it, so we are using high mileage motor oil. I just want to make it clear that although we're doing a lot of these tasks on the Pontiac Fiero that you've seen in previous episodes, this car is both mid-engined and rear-wheel drive. A lot of your modern cars, your economy cars, your average car today is front-engined and front-wheel drive. So you won't be able to find everything in exactly the same spot on your car as you will on the Fiero, but the idea is still the same. All of the theories are still the same. So if you're doing an oil change, first thing you want to do is run the car for 5 or 10 minutes so that the oil is warmed up and it flows more easily out of the engine. Second thing you want to do is jack up the car or drive the car up on some ramps. If your car is front-engined, you're going to want to put the front end up in the air, but this car is mid-engine, so I've got the back of the car up in the air. If you're jacking it, if you're just using the jack, make sure you put jack stands underneath the frame of the car so that in case your jack fails, that way you won't be crushed if you're underneath the car. Make sure before you start your oil change you have something to catch your old oil in. In most cars you'll have at least a gallon of oil coming out, and it's going to be almost unpredictable where it lands. So make sure you got something large enough to hold all your oil. After you have the car safely lifted up in the air, you're going to want to get underneath the car and find your oil pan. The oil pan should be fairly obvious, but if your car has a lot of plastic underneath it, a lot of cars come with windage trays these days, it may be a little more difficult to find. This is the oil pan for the Pontiac Fiero. It's kind of right in the middle of the car. As you can see, there is your oil pan drain bolt. It's a little oily because I've already drained all the oil out of this thing. But on this car, it's a 15mm bolt. Make sure you are using the correct size socket because you don't want to round off that bolt because then it'll be extremely difficult to get off. So I've already drained the oil, like I said. I put that on just hand tight. But be careful when you're doing this, because the oil will be slightly warm. So what I like to do is when you get the bolt close to coming out, kind of just barely grab it, kind of get above the bolt and pull it away quickly, because that oil will be squirting out and it will be warm. So whenever possible, I like to let the oil drain overnight, just for peace of mind. Get as much of the old oil out of the car as you can. Once you have the oil draining, it's always a good idea to take off the oil cap, the oil fill cap on top of the motor. That way some air goes in as the oil's coming out, kind of makes things flow a little easier. Now it's time to remove the oil filter. This is one variation of an oil filter wrench. It's just the right size to grip the outside of your oil filter, and then it has a square on the top for your ratcheting wrench. So we just took the oil filter out of the car. It was kind of hard to film it and do it at the same time, so I'm kind of going to give you a little bit of reenactment. So if this is the oil filter in the car, that oil filter wrench just slips on over the top, and your wrench just slips in here, and then you literally just turn it off and it comes out of the car without any major issues. Once again, make sure that you have something underneath the area where your oil filter is, because the oil filter will be full of oil and you don't want that going all over your floor because it just makes a bigger mess. Once you get the old oil filter off, then obviously you have to put the new one on. It's always a good idea to take some of your oil and just rub it around this gasket here to kind of prepare it for the mating surface on the car. Supposedly it prevents any leaks that might happen. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I've always done it. Some people will use that oil filter wrench to put your oil filter back on. I never have. I think it's way too easy to over tighten your oil filter that way. The way that I've been taught, and it's always worked for me, is to just screw it on regularly until it gets secured on there, and then give it some extra effort up to a quarter turn. If you go too tight, you will pinch this gasket here on your filter and you will have an oil leak. So we're here underneath the Fiero. Hopefully up there you can see where the oily circle where the old oil filter was, and putting the new filter in is quite simple. Just gotta move it up in there and spin it. There we go. So that's what I was talking about. It's pretty secure on there. So what we're going to do now is just grip it and another quarter turn. It's that simple. After you get your oil filter back on and you've let your oil drain sufficiently long enough, you can make sure you put that bolt back in your oil pan. You don't want to over tighten that bolt though. You can always find the torque specs for that bolt. Should be either in your owner's manual, or with the advent of the internet, you can find it on the owner's forum for your particular vehicle. You don't want to over tighten anything, because that's just as bad as not tightening things far enough. If you pinch gaskets or you crack the oil pan, you're going to have a leak. So there's no need to torque down that oil pan drain bolt super tight. It's just not necessary. So now that you've got that taken care of, it's time to put the oil back in your car. You should be able to easily find how much oil your vehicle needs in your owner's manual. After you've got the oil back in the car, make sure you get all your tools and your drain pan out from underneath the car and lower it back down the ground. Then start it, let it run for 10-15 seconds and shut it off. Give it 30 seconds to a minute to let the oil drain back down, and pull the dipstick. The dipstick should tell you approximately how close your oil level is to accurate. You may or may not need to add more oil. Don't be surprised if the first time you drive your car after an oil change you get a weird smell. It might be the smell of burning oil, because when you take off the oil filter, as well as when you add oil into the car, you're probably going to get some oil dripping on either your exhaust manifolds or other areas that get hot. So as long as you don't have anything pouring out from the car or any obvious leaks, don't worry about it. You got to burn off that oil that spilled. Now we're going to pull the dipstick, check the oil level. On this car, if you're on the right side of the car, the passenger side, it's this black pull ring here. You're just going to pull it. On modern cars, it's a little better labeled. You're going to pull the dipstick out. But first thing we're going to do is actually clean it off, get any of the old oil off of there so that it's clean. And then we're going to put the dipstick back in and pull it right back out, and that should give us an accurate level of the oil reading. Not sure how well this is going to show up on camera, but you can see it has full there, add there. You have a little bit of a sheen, a little bit after the add mark. So we're going to put the rest of that 5 quarts of oil in the car. Now you may be wondering what to do with the over a gallon of used oil that you have. Well, thankfully, since you bought the right amount of oil for your car, you can pour the old oil into the container for your new oil. And a lot of your auto parts shops like Pep Boys and AutoZone, they will take your used oil from you at no charge. I hope this video was helpful to you for doing your own oil change on your car. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down below. And if there's any general maintenance videos that you would like to see, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It helps out quite a bit. And leave a thumbs up on this video if you liked it. And until next time, thanks for watching another episode of DIY Amateur Hour. Should be in your owner's manual. The amount of oil that your vehicle needs. Jesus. Don't be surprised if the first time you drive your car after an oil change, you get a weird smell that you probably haven't heard. Yeah, a smell you haven't heard before.